A reading from Romans 8:18-25. I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory about to be revealed to us. For the creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the children of God. For the creation was subjected to futility, not of its own will, but by the will of the one who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be set free from its enslavement to decay and will obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. We know that the whole creation has been groaning together as it suffers together the pains of labor. And not only the creation, but we ourselves, who have the first fruits of the Spirit, groan inwardly while we wait for adoption, the redemption of our bodies. For in hope we were saved. Now hope that is seen is not hope, for who hopes for what one already sees? But if we hope for what we do not see, we wait for it with patience.
So this Sunday we return to our Abide and Grow theme and this month's fruit, which is patience. But I really wanted to preach on something else today. And so instead of preach on patience, I'm going to ask you to practice patience by waiting until next Sunday when I'm sure Ann will give a wonderful sermon on it. Promise. In all seriousness, I decided to go a different direction this week. And that is partly because of last week. Sitting up here on Easter morning, I was reminded how often we pastors talk in broad strokes about death not having the final word. But we don't get very specific about it. Do we mean that metaphorically? Poetically, or literally? All of the above. You know, over the 21 years that I was a full-time pastor, I wrote hundreds of sermons on all kinds of topics, except one. There was one thing I never gave a sermon on. What happens after we die? And if you had asked me why, I think I would have said, well, because we really don't know anything about what happens when we die. I have faith that we come from God and we return to God, but we can't really say much more because we just don't know anything. But the truth is, we preachers talk about things we don't know anything about all the time. Theology is, by nature, a very murky and uncertain endeavor. This life is a mystery. Love is a mystery. God is the mystery. If we only preached about things we were certain of, we would hardly preach at all. So why, really, didn't I talk about the afterlife all those years? I think the honest answer was that I didn't want to be seen as unserious. I like to think of myself as a fairly reasonable, rational, even skeptical person. And the afterlife, with all of its cultural baggage and images of pearly gates and St. Peter with his book and angels sitting on clouds playing harps, it can just all feel like fantasy. And I guess I didn't want to be seen as unintellectual, irrational, or just silly. But you know, each one of us, sooner or later, is going to come to the end of our magnificent, heartbreaking, beautiful life. And when we do, this question is not going to feel like fantasy at all. It may be a loaded question. It may be an uncomfortable or even scary question. It may be an almost impossible to fully answer question, but what happens to us when we die is not a silly question. And so on this second Sunday of Easter, the season of resurrection, I want to end my 21-year streak of not addressing this topic. And even though I don't know what happens when we die, of course, I want to speak honestly about what I believe happens and why I believe it. For me, the place to start thinking about the afterlife is this life. Because I think something extraordinary, far beyond our capacity to understand, is going on around us all the time, life itself. But we are usually so busy running around, distracted and worried and lost in our thoughts that we don't stop and consider the question of what all of this is. Why it's here at all. Where did it come from? Is it just random? When we take the world around us for granted so much that we don't realize that the best evidence that this is all gloriously extraordinary is the fact that anything is here in the first place. And I don't just mean the stuff in existence. I'm getting very deep on you very quick. I know, it's Sunday morning. Not just the stuff in existence, like you and me and trees and planets and those little dung beetles that navigate by the stars. I suppose it's possible that all of those things came by sheer chance. But more importantly, I mean existence itself. 3D reality. How did it come to be? What is it? If we think about it, it's really quite clear that something far beyond our pay grade is going on, which is not evidence of an afterlife, of course. But for me, it's important to keep in mind that this life, this existence, is not normal. We don't know what this is. So when my skeptical mind argues that an afterlife seems irrational, fantastical, impossible, I remind myself that this life is too. Existence itself is, to me, evidence that something amazing is going on. So then why not something amazing beyond this existence? But is there any actual evidence that something exists, that we exist beyond this life? Well, for the most of human history, I think the answer was no. There was belief. There was faith. There were people who seemed to have knowledge of the other side, but actual evidence was in short supply. Until something interesting started happening in the 1970s. This was when medical technology became good enough that we started to resuscitate people, especially from cardiac arrest, in much larger numbers. And over the last 50 years, thousands and thousands of people who were medically dead, meaning no heartbeat and no brain activity, were literally brought back to life. This is a new phenomenon. And about 20% of these people report having an extraordinary experience. These are people who have what are called near-death experiences, or NDEs. And if you've heard of this, you've probably put them in the same category with things like UFOs and Bigfoot. I know I did for a long time. It just seemed too out there, what they were saying. But a year or so ago, I started to take them more seriously because I discovered that, unlike Bigfoot, there are thousands and thousands of well-documented near-death experiences. So many that serious researchers around the world, like Dr. Bruce Grayson at the University of Virginia and the Dutch cardiologist Pim van Lommel, have risked their reputation to study these things. Something is going on, scientifically. And speaking of serious researchers, you may not know that even the legendary psychotherapist Carl Jung, you know him, he talked about these because he had one. And he wrote about it in the 1940s. We have other written accounts that go back to the 1700s, some maybe even longer. And no matter when in history or where in the world they take place, there are remarkable similarities among these accounts. Almost universally, they report leaving their body like it was clothes that they discarded, and they instantly feel at peace, even if their body was in pain. They have no fear at all. And in fact, they almost always report feeling the presence of an overwhelming love beyond anything they can describe. Frequently, they report being visited by some kind of guide or even a past relative who reassures them. And interestingly, they often describe in great detail getting to review their life. And incredibly, they experience the impact of their actions, not just from their perspective, but from the perspective of the people around them, the people they were kind to, the people they were mean to. They say they could feel what that person felt. And when they come back to this world, unlike a dream or a hallucination, they say they remember every detail of it. It stays with them for the rest of their life. And as a result of it, they often live much more compassionate, caring lives going forward, because it is clear to them now that we are here to learn how to love. I know all of this may sound extraordinary, fantastical, a little nutty, very hard to believe. But there is little doubt now that tens of thousands of people have had experiences like this. There's no questioning that. And while it's possible that all of these somehow could be explained as a byproduct of these amazing brains of ours, it's possible. Given the detail of what they describe and the consistency of the stories and the number of people experiencing them, it seems to me the more likely explanation is that they're true. Which as Christians really shouldn't surprise us. Doesn't Isaiah say, "Your dead shall live, their bodies shall rise, you who dwell in the dust, awake and sing for joy"? Doesn't Paul say in our reading today, "I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing to the glory about to be revealed to us"? And doesn't Jesus say, "Do not let your hearts be troubled. Believe in God, believe in me. In my Father's house there are many rooms. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and take you with me to myself, so that where I am, you may also be." Did he not tell the criminal on the cross the sweetest words any of us could hope to hear on the last day of our lives? "Today, my friend, you will be with me in paradise." It's clear that our tradition believes something comes next. And I've always affirmed that as a pastor. Just like last Sunday, I have said countless times that death does not have the final word, that nothing can separate us from the love of God. I have affirmed these things because the spiritual tradition that I have given myself to affirms them. I believed in them, but I'm not sure I actually could say I believed them, if that makes sense. I gave them intellectual assent, theological assent, but at some level I was still agnostic about an afterlife. It just seemed too fantastical. But that has changed for me now. The more I see just how impossible the existence of this world is, and the more I read about near-death experiences, and the more I just trust what Jesus said to actually be true, the more I've been able to soften that skeptical part of me. I've started to ask what my heart tells me is true. And if you're a big head person like I've been most of my life, this may be difficult, but many of you here will understand when I say our hearts know things that our minds don't. And when I open my heart and just rest in this extraordinary mystery that we are in around us, when I sit sometimes in the morning and watch the trees just blowing in the breeze, or listen to a songbird, when I stop thinking so much and just let myself feel what I know deep within me, there really is no doubt that we are more than just these bodies, that this life is not the end, and that what happens to us after we die is good and safe and more wonderful than anything that we can imagine. I'm just sorry it took me so long to start preaching about it.